Welcome back, everyone. This is I Did Not Read Your Book. I didn't read your book. I am your host, Lutch, and today we are not doing a podcast, but in fact, we are doing another edition of IDRYB Live. We are going to be joined by some past IDRYB guests, so you might be familiar with them. We have Blaine Pardo here and Anirudh Garg from our earlier episodes. So what we're going to be diving into today, if you can't read the title, is just a conversation about what is it that we care about and who do we trust when it comes to news, culture, all that kind of stuff. Where do we get information and that kind of stuff. This is going to be a recurring, ongoing conversation, and so I thought this was a great place to start. We, even though Blaine and I, and definitely Anirudh and I, if you've seen our past live streams, have gotten into some of this stuff, as a specific event, so to speak. I really wanted to put a stamp on the beginning. And so with that being said, I will go ahead and take the lead. And I just want to say that the top three things that I care about when it comes to politics and culture, number one would be liberty. I think that stretches to individualism and just the ability for the individual to have the pursuit of happiness and the life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. I put that all in one category. The second thing would be well-being. So that can be defined in many different ways, but I see it as the opposite end of the spectrum from pain or suffering. And so there's many different ways to define well-being and what it is and what it's not, and suffering and what it is and what it's not. But if you can have that conversation and figure out what those two things are, then I think the prescription to what to do, what our next steps are pretty easy. And then third, I think prosperity is a value, because even though that kind of seems, I can see people taking that as a materialistic view, but I think that because money makes the world go round, we need to be successful in financially in order to put out into the world whatever it is that we want, whether it's a message or a product or this or that, whatever it is, you need money to do it. And so that's what is important to me. So those are the values that I will be coming from. I guess we can all go through our values, and then we'll all go through the sources, and then we'll get into the bloodbath. So bringing up who you might recognize from the earlier streams and the previous IDRYB Live, we have Anirudh Garg joining us. Anirudh, why don't you let the people know what it is that you care about?
All right. Hi, my name is Anirudh Garg. And for me, I guess the three most important things for me is, one, the maximization of human liberty. Number two, I would say the improvement of material conditions. And third, I think, would be creating an environment to foster innovation and new ideas.
Cool. Anything you want to expand on there, or is that pretty much the long short of it?
Yeah, that's a long short. We can get into the details later.
Perfect. All right. And Blaine, you are up.
Well, it's interesting. I came at this from the things that were keeping me up at night rather than the values I push. But, I think they tend to fall in the same buckets. To me, it's funny. The first of us all lead with liberty. And to me, I think one of the biggest divides that's hitting our country right now is the belief that the collective overrides personal or individual liberties. And I think that's an area that we see a lot of conflict in. We see it around COVID. We see it around gun control. We see it around a lot of different things. And I think it's something we as a country have to kind of wrap our hands around and try to resolve in some way, shape, or form. The second thing that I think is a topic that keeps me up a little bit is the wokeism and this belief of kind of a digital lynch mob that feels empowered to contact your employers or to try to ruin your life or make threats to you or whatever because they don't agree with where you stand politically. I think it's a real threat to individual liberties, and I think it's a real problem that we as a country are going to have to wrap our hands around at some point here. And the third thing that really kind of resonates with me, and I call it media accountability, and media really applies to big tech as well as the mainstream media. Uh, we have stories that come out all the time that are false, that are leaked from an official, Washington D.C. insider that turns out that it's completely erroneous, things along those lines. And we have media figures that have become uh, commentators, have actually become more of an entertainer than someone who's actually presenting facts. And there's no accountability, there's no checks and balances against that. And I'm not advocating by any stretch censorship, but I also think there's got to be some degree of accountability that when somebody comes out and blatantly lies and goes on the air, they need to lose their jobs. And if that's a tech company blocking a story going out because they don't like it, then somebody needs to lose their job for that as well. So those are the three buckets that I kind of came up with.
Awesome. So that gives a very good starting point in the fact, as you mentioned, we all have liberty in some form as a top tier value or something that we want to preserve. And so, keeping that in mind, just moving along with our introductions, I would say the people who I trust to give me information when it comes to embodying these values and living the kind of life that I want to live. First and foremost would be Tim Pool for me. I think he is. I've been following him for a good 5, 6, 7 years. And when he was still doing on the ground reporting, I remember when he was in Sweden doing the no-go zones, and I've watched his evolution, and his views have changed. And I would say for the most part, I think my views have changed along with him, although of course not all of them. I just think he is, in terms of the way that I view the world, I think he gets it, and it feels pretty much the same way, but articulates it much better than I do. Second would probably be I got a long list here and we can get into more, but if I have to pick the top three, I probably would go with Steven Crowder. I actually just released a clip earlier today that was saying Crowder is for people who already agree with Crowder. But I don't think that changes the validity of his information. And even though he can be a little bit, out there sometimes, I think the information that he brings to light is very good. And then coming out of left field a little bit, not even really a political channel, would be Abba and Preach. These two guys that just they have a reaction channel. And sometimes they'll talk about politics, sometimes they'll talk about culture. And they they talk about things that don't really get thrust into that political space as much. But in my opinion, depending on what they are, can be just as important as the things that make headlines. So those are again, I've got a long list here. We can get into it, but if I had to pick three, those, and I could never listen to anybody again, I think those three would probably send me in the right direction. I think, I'm hesitant not to bring up anybody who is specifically on the left in that list, although I do have some on my longer list. But I do think that Abba and Preach are far enough left in their personal lives that what they talk about, I guess you would say they're based, but they do kind of have this what I would call normie, middle of the road type of thing, type of mentality that is more in line with a liberal mentality that's not a leftist mentality. So that is where I am coming from. So we went to Anirudh first last time. So Blaine, how about you? Who are your favorites?
Well, I want to first clarify my approach to media in general, which
Please.
is I really don't trust anybody anymore.
That's a good.
And so when I see something in the media, my initial instinct is if it's something that's of interest to me, I will try to get to primary evidence or primary data that backs up what they're saying. And that even comes when somebody says, well, here's a quote from so and so. I'm like, okay, I want to read the whole quote. I want to hear the quote within context,
Right.
etc. And so I go to a splattering of different sources and have to do a lot of digging to get down to what I would call core data. Some of that's because I write a lot of nonfiction, and when you do that, you really want those primary sources rather than the sound bites sometimes that get promoted. So, yeah, some of the websites I'll go look at Daily Caller. They've actually been doing some very good investigative journalism recently, and so is Town Hall. Epic Times is good. Wall Street Journal, fantastic. Their editorial board, I think, is solid. They really attempt to kind of extract out the political aspects and really deal with facts, and I do appreciate that. I'll be the guy that says I do occasionally go to the Washington Post. And I will even turn on like Fox News and then flip over to CNN later in the day to see the same story, to kind of go, okay, is there a middle ground here? What's the perspective of the other side on both sides of this, to determine if I really want to do any more digging. I'm with you. I had Louder with Crowder down. I think some of the stuff he did post-election was pretty much investigative journalism in many respects, which we haven't seen from a lot of comedians. And I too like Tim Pool. I think that he does a really outstanding job. I try to, if I get the information from a podcast, though, I usually try to go out and find that original root data, because I found a lot of podcasters kind of snip things down to justify their own point, and so
Absolutely.
that's how I have to approach it, and I think a lot of Americans are in the same boat. It's like, I don't know where to go to trust anything, so I have to do digging on things that I think are really important.
Definitely. Great points all around. I definitely agree all across the board. Anirudh, what do you have to add to the conversation?
I guess I'd be a little bit of an odd one out because I generally am very distrustful of punditry because unfortunately, the incentives to be a pundit is to be entertaining, not necessarily to be factually correct. And unfortunately, being factually correct means you're going to be very boring. So you're not going to be a very good pundit or entertaining. It's why I tend to avoid listening to people if I want the news. I tend to read firsthand. If I were to say individual people whose writing has changed my view of the world, I would say number one is probably Noam Chomsky. I've read a lot of his books. Also read his books on linguistics as well. I would say another one would, and I really, really hate this man, Paul Krugman. Yeah, I've been, as an econ major, I've been forced to read so many of his textbooks, and his writing is painful. But he's pretty analytically spot on, and he's made some. He's pretty good at supporting his claims, and I unfortunately begrudgingly have to agree with them because a lot of them are very difficult to refute because he does a very good job supporting them. I guess in like the few media entertainment, I listen to a couple of Twitch streamers. Like the primary one would probably be Stephen Bannell. His screen name is Destiny. He got big doing debates. I mean, I respect him just because he's very analytical. He rightfully points out hypocrisies on both on the right and the left, and he has the same political aspirations as me, which is, I guess, breaking the back of the Republican Party and hopefully moving the country in a more like equitable economic direction where we're increasing the material benefits of our citizens and improving the livelihoods of general people. So likewise, I listen to him. though I primarily stick to reading even from like news publications. I'm actually a big fan of the Wall Street Journal. I have a subscription with them. My favorite one is The Economist. They're about center right in the UK, so center left here. I tend to read a lot, and if it's an issue of science, economics, sociology, I tend to look at the scientific literature or the area of study and their literature and their academic consensus. I'm also distrustful of journalists. My high school debate coach, she's a conservative, like gun-loving Texas conservative, but I love her to death because she gave me one important insight, which is when reporters write stories, they're writing it from the perspective of a person with a degree in journalism, not necessarily the field that they're talking about. So it's always important to try to go to the primary source or the person who is more understanding. So likewise, I guess my general thing is I would agree with Blaine, go towards the primary source.
Awesome. Cool. So let's open it up a little bit. I'm going to take that big spot.